This episode is not sponsored, but we encourage you to help support the small businesses, charities, and organisations that we mention. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Our Circle. I'm Jess.
And I'm Rhiannon.
And today we are welcoming someone who's really close to my heart, part of my circle. She's a secondary English teacher, a joint young carers lead, and deputy head of house. One of my best friends, and also the godmother to my daughter, Al.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. I've been really excited about joining you both.
Oh, we're so excited to have you.
So tell us a bit more. How did you get into teaching? Like, how long have you been a teacher for?
So I'm in my NQT year now, and I did something. I know, Jess, I've spoken to you about this before, and obviously you've been with me on my journey as well. But I did something called Teach First. So it's a graduate program, and it trains you basically over 2 years to become a teacher. So I started that not last year, the year before, and then they basically train you over summer for 5 weeks. Wow. Really intensive training. So I moved from Cardiff, where I went to uni. Obviously, Jess, we went to uni there together. And trained for 5 weeks over summer, and then they just drop you in a school and place you in a school, and you're teaching on your own from day one. So it was absolutely insane.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it's mad. And it's different to a PGCE, because a PGCE you kind of go to uni and then they kind of hold your hand a little bit more, and you shadow, and then you kind of joint teach, and it's over several months. But Teach First is much more intensive, because it's
learning on the job.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
And it's not for everybody. Like, it's actually insane, like so mad. And so many of my friends now who I did the program with, they had come straight from uni, so they literally had no teaching experience whatsoever. And thankfully for me, worked in a school before and had 2 years after I graduated uni before kind of deciding that teaching was possibly a path I wanted to go down. But it's really mad. But it worked really well for me, because I prefer to just jump in the deep end, and it's just sink or swim, and you just learn on the job. I don't want to have my hand held all the time. I just want to get on with it and just see what happens.
So for listeners who might be abroad and not in the UK, or even might not even understand how you train to be a teacher, what you were explaining is that a lot of people, if they want to become a teacher, they can do a degree for 3 years training to become a teacher, where they have, is it 3 years or is it 4 years?
So a PGCE is, you have to have a degree in something first. So for example, English, psychology, degrees in psychology. But then a PGCE is the kind of standard way into teaching. I'm not saying it's any less, but it's what people know as kind of teacher training. And that's
like a master's, isn't it?
It's almost like a master's, I think. And they, for 1 year, and then you achieve a postgraduate certificate in education at the end of it. And then as you're in uni in that year, you're in schools and you're put on placements, different schools, I think. But Teach First is different because it's a 2-year program and it's a graduate program. So you still have to have a degree, similarly to a PGCE, but they train you intensively over that 5 weeks.
And then a fast track almost.
It's almost like a fast track, and then you're just working as a teacher. So I worked as an unqualified teacher for a year last year, was paid for it, obviously, was on a salary, and then this year I'm NQT. So I still got to pass this year, but I mean, fingers crossed.
So what was your degree in before? Because how did it go from a degree to then deciding to teach?
So I did a degree in psychology, 4-year degree. So unlike Jess, I did a placement year. So I worked in Cardiff memory team, based in Landock Hospital just outside Cardiff, for my 3rd year at uni, which was absolutely amazing. It was the best part of my uni experience. It was just incredible. And that's what I thought I wanted to go into, something medical after I did that. And then I ended up working with a man with early onset Alzheimer's disease in my final year. So for 2 years then I worked with him, and that's what I thought I wanted to go into. I wanted to look at graduate medicine, and then I thought, okay, I don't know what I want to do. So then I started working in a kitchen in a cafe after uni, and then worked as a learning support assistant as well in 2 schools in Cardiff. So that was definitely the inspiration and kind of guided me towards being interested in teaching.
I remember being a bit shocked though, because I feel like it's at one point, because we were learning support assistants at one point at the same time, and I remember sort of, I thought we'd shared the opinion that we weren't interested in teaching. I remember it putting me off working in a school, being a teacher, because I was like, just the intensity of the job, I think. Not that I'm someone who just wants an easy life per se, but I was like, I don't think this is for me, and I don't like the idea of not being able to switch off from your job. Like, any teacher that I know still comes home with all their work. They are thinking about it day and night. Even if they're lying in bed, they're thinking, right, I could do this in this lesson, or you're worried about a child, or it's a lot. It kind of consumes your whole life, and that's something that put me off. So was it something that you at first didn't want to do, but then decided, actually, I think I could do this?
I mean, I definitely obviously spoke to you at the time, and I remember when I was living in Cardiff, and the first one-to-one job I had was in a nursery, and it was for a 4-year-old boy who displayed various symptoms for ADHD and autism and lots of different things. He was an absolute pinball. I remember he used to look me in the eyes from across the room, keep eye contact, and then run at full pace, and then land on my 2 feet with his feet on me. Like, I was thinking, oh my God. And then after that, I came back from work. I used to have a nap every afternoon, and I was like, nah, this is not for me. And they were just like snotty and horrible, and they used to like piss themselves, actually rang. So I was like, after that, I was like, no. Then I went up to year 1 and year 2, I think, and did a bit of general TAing, which was better. And I kind of took small classes of kids out. But I thought then, I was like, no, this is not for me. It's just like a kind of stopgap. We'll see what happens. And I was still kind of interested in the memory side of things and working with older people. But then I went to a second primary school in Cardiff, and that was just outside Cardiff in St Mellons. And I really enjoyed it. The teacher that I worked with in the class was absolutely lovely. And she basically encouraged me to go into teaching. She said, you should go into teaching. So I was like, well, I don't really know what I want to do. I needed more of a challenge. I really enjoyed the work as an LSA, but I wasn't feeling challenged and pushed enough. And I'm always wanting to challenge myself and learn a lot more. And kind of, I was looking for that leadership role and that management kind of thing. So that then encouraged me to apply to teach first and to see what happened. And then here I am.
Do you think it's about the people that you come across? Because I feel like you just said that one of the teachers you worked with was so lovely. And do you think, were there any teachers growing up that you thought were great, or like, some people have, like, they're inspired by teachers that have taught them?
Yeah, definitely. I had an English teacher in the secondary school that I went to, and I didn't really enjoy school, secondary school. And I just remember it wasn't even the academic side of things, as in teaching from that perspective with her. It was the safety and it was the pastoral side of things. And I just, the only memories that I have of that teacher is being really safe and being a warm presence.
Oh, that's nice.
And that's what I want to achieve, and that's what I want to give to children. I want to provide that safe space for them so that they can be open and trust me and trust adults. The ones that I work with don't have that, unfortunately.
Yeah. And do you feel like in order to gain that trust for them, do you feel like you need to be a bit more open with them? So like, if you were having a bad day, for example, would you show them that you're having a bad day, or do you feel like you kind of have to have your game face on as a teacher?
It's a really, really interesting question. And there is a lovely and brutal and dry and witty teacher that I work with now. And at first I thought he hated me, and I was like, oh my God, this is awful. But he is very much, he's a teacher, and there's a barrier that the kids don't cross in terms of, they don't know about his personal life, they don't really know anything about him. Whereas I am the complete opposite. Like, I share things with the kids because I think that they need to understand that there is that safe space, and if they know a little bit about you, they know that you're human and that they see that you're human. Definitely. I think I've definitely had points where I have become emotional in the classroom and I have tears in my eyes, and I don't shy away from that. Like I've said, look, you can see that I'm affected by this. So recently, the last couple of weeks, I teach a little girl in year 7 who her father committed suicide during lockdown.
Wow.
It's just, yeah, it's really, really horrible to think about, and I think kids' mental health during lockdown has been really, really affected massively. But this particular student, I'd asked them to do a little bit of writing, just reflective writing on their experiences during lockdown and what they've learned about themselves. And she said, can we read them out? And I said, okay, if there's time at the end, we can read it out. And she was just one of 2 students that wanted to read their little bit of writing out. So I was like, okay, go for it. So she just started saying that she had learned that she was getting better and that she's finally coming out of her bedroom more. And I was like, oh, holy shit, think of something happy. Oh
my God, it's making me tear up. Oh
yeah. And she just looked at me at the end, and I was like, and everyone was just silent, these little year 7s just silent, and I was like clapping and I was down, and she just looked at me and she said, are you crying? And I said, no, don't be silly. But she knew I was, and I knew I was. But it was so lovely. And I think it is absolutely amazing that she felt safe enough to do that in front of me, do that in front of all of her peers. It's amazing. And that's exactly the environment that I want to create.
Well, this sort of leads me on to what I wanted to ask you, actually, because over the past year, we've seen just numerous over and over and over again some sort of historic moment that's testing to so many families, whether it's been the Black Lives Matter movement, whether it's been the Yemen crisis. It's been, I've got a list here of the amount of things that have happened. We've experienced like the Nigeria SARS incident. We've had multiple massacres across China and Ethiopia, the Beirut explosion, women's safety and equality, Asian hate crime. All of these things we're listing off, and it's just so consistent, but it relates and affects so many people across the world. But of course, in this country as well, we do have a diverse population where there are a mixture of kids and that are going to be affected by this. Either their families, relatives, friends, whatever, overseas are being affected by this, or in this country. How do you deal with that? How are you encouraged? Like, are you encouraged to sort of navigate conversations with students towards this, to talk about their experience of it, or how they're feeling, their emotions? Or are you sort of encouraged to steer away from it and just get them to distract them, like with school? Like how has that been? Because of course you've got a pandemic to start with anyway for this year, but then all of that on top of it. How do you deal with that as a teacher with kids who are obviously going to be affected by this?
I think it boils down, which I think the foundation of teaching, I believe very, very strongly, is the relationships with the children. And I think if you don't have positive and open relationships with the students, then you don't have a basis for teaching them. So I think it is, as I said before, it is about that trust, that level of trust. And I often reiterate with them, I say, I'm not just your English teacher, even though you've got a tutor and I'm a tutor for a different class of students. You can come and talk to me about anything. I'm here to listen to you as a non-judgmental ear. And I always will be, when I don't teach you, I'm still going to be there for you. It is just building up that level of trust and safety in the classroom. But it takes so much time and it takes so much work. So Teach First only works with schools with low socioeconomic backgrounds.
Okay.
So a lot of the children that I work with and interact with on a daily basis, they often don't, not all of them, they don't have, you know, a supportive home life necessarily.
Okay.
Or adults that they trust. So it's really tough, and that kind of materializes itself in their behavior a lot.
Right.
Well. I think, coming back to the question, which I've gone off on a tangent, I think we're in a really, really great position as English teachers because there is that room and space for such open, rich discussions in comparison to other subjects like maths, right, for example. Right. I think, I was saying this the other day actually, apparently when students are asked which teacher knows them the best, they usually say their English teacher, which I think is such a lovely thing. And I feel completely honoured to be in this position. I always have, and I think I always will. It's such an amazing opportunity to see these students grow up and go through these things that are happening in the world and kind of be there for them at that time as a consistent, stable figure in their lives that they may not have at home or they may not have ever had before. They know what to expect when they're coming in the classroom. They know how I'm going to be. They know how school's set up, which I think is something that I learned from the pandemic, is that students need school. They need stability. They need security.
But is it something though that your boss, for example, they would tell you to encourage them to talk about these things when it happens? Like, do you ever have like a briefing about it when something has happened or come up in the news? Like, do you ever get briefed on, okay, we might have some students who might be affected by this, you know, try and keep them distracted or try and talk to them about it? Like, do you ever get any sort of advice about how to go about things like that, or is it something that isn't necessarily actually focused on?
I suppose the thing is, I think from my limited experience, obviously, I feel like I would have to seek that support if I needed it. Like, I think it's great because to a certain degree, you do have some freedom, obviously, with teaching and teaching styles and how you want to teach in your classroom. So it's up to you. I mean, we could type in, for example, with particular text that we study, that could then lead on to a particular discussion or a poem. You know, in their poetry anthology, we might then go off and talk about context and then bring in different things and relate it to something that they're aware of or something that's in the news. So, for example, recently I've been teaching transactional, so non-fiction writing, and they've been creating speeches. And I showed them an example of politician speeches. So I might have shown Boris Johnson's speech, for example, and had a look at what was effective about his speech and how he presented his speech. And then that might then lead on to different discussions. And it's lovely to see them interact with that and have the opportunity for that to kind of go off in particular directions as well.
I know when I was working at a school, we had like quite a traumatic event happen at the school where one quite small child got a head injury and had to be taken off in a helicopter, and it was in the middle of the playground at lunchtime. A lot of children saw it. It was something that affected a lot of adults and children at the school, and we had a briefing on it the next day. It was sort of like they told us that the approach should be very much student-led. So if the student maybe don't necessarily talk about it unless the student wants to talk about it. Okay. So I feel like that's probably something a lot of the approach that a lot of schools would take, because it's almost like, well, maybe we don't want to, if it's not on their mind, like you said, like a distraction, Ree, if it's a distraction school, we don't need to talk about it if this is their kind of safe haven and then it's not on their mind. But if it is on their mind, we should be open to have that discussion and as a class. And like you said, like you Alice, you said that you wanted to create this safe environment and for it to be open for people to feel like they can talk about anything or bring anything to you, any topic of discussion. So I imagine a lot of schools, like you said, you haven't had the most experience, but I imagine a lot of schools would take that approach, that if a student came to you I guess then it should be brought to the table to open up as a discussion.
I always wonder, or is there a sort of danger in that in some ways though? I understand it completely and I think that is the right approach, but I also wonder I suppose if you're I'm not saying that all teachers aren't, I'm sure many are, but if you're not an attentive teacher, you might not notice, or you might have students who aren't going to speak up even if they are in pain. So I feel like that must be quite difficult when this is their safe place, and it's their safe place where they could talk about this, but they don't have it in them to bring it up themselves. I think that must be really hard. And I'm sure, Alice, you're someone who is saying that you do want that safe space. You are, taking note of how they feel, how they act and stuff like that, and their behavior. But it must be hard for a lot of students who don't have teachers like yourself who are looking out for them and their best interests and their behavior. I think that must be very difficult for a lot of kids in these situations, and like you said, ones who might be a bit more disadvantaged at home, not have that type of support. No, definitely. And I think it's difficult. I think I find it difficult as well. I definitely feel such a pressure to progress through schemes of learning, and there's not always time to pause. I mean, there's actually never time to pause, really. Right.
Such a pressure to get through a book, to get through a play, and particularly when you get to Key Stage 4, it's really difficult to not exist teaching wise in terms of it being exam led, learning this skill, ticking this question, learning how to write a speech, learning how to write a letter. We have got so much to get through all the time, and there's such a pressure. There's not always time to pause and reflect and kind of discuss these issues. I think where it can come in is kind of extracurricular things and extracurricular support and tutor time and things like that. I did something called Empathy Week, which covered lots of different topics, and that was during the pandemic, so I led it, and we did it on Teams with, I think it was about 20 students. It was voluntary, and we learned about lots and lots of different challenges that certain individuals have gone through in real life, such as immigration, seeking asylum, refugee status, racism, cultural identity, Black Lives Matter, all of that. So that was such a lovely opportunity for me to come away from the scheme of learning and teaching Macbeth and teaching Romeo and Juliet and getting through the play, to ask them what they think and actually teach them and open their eyes to certain things that possibly they don't have time or the opportunity to experience and discuss.
And more real life as well, actually, if you think about it. Not to say that Shakespeare isn't real life. That's very much a part of, especially this country's culture, isn't it? And it's so reflective in movies and things like that. But it's not going to be something that always is hard hitting for a lot of kids, is it? It's something that they're, if anything, it's a chore. So to be able to have those open discussions about life events that you gave them that chance, so I think it's so valuable to them.
And during Empathy Week, did you feel like you learnt from the children at all? Like, was it a two-way thing?
No, I mean, I always do feel like that anyway. They teach me things that I don't know as well, but it was really, really interesting. So I split it into Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4.
What age is that? Sorry, I'm
so no, sorry. So Key Stage 3 is year 7 to year 9, and then Key Stage 4 is year 10, year 11.
Okay.
So I had a lot more year 7s, obviously, bless them, the little keynotes, signing up to it. And they were so engaged and so passionate about everything, typing their little discussion points on the chat. And it was so lovely, honestly. And the idea of Empathy Week was to learn from these different individuals and the challenges and the barriers that they've faced in real life, and for them to reflect on it and talk about it and discuss it and learn about it. And there was one afternoon that Eva, a friend who works at the school as well, she led some of the Key Stage 3 lessons for me, because I was also teaching all week and I just had loads on. So luckily, bless her, she took on a couple of lessons, but I could see on my laptop, I was in another meeting, and the team chat kept popping up, and one student said, "Oh, I feel really sad. I feel alone," or something. And then one of my tutees was in it, and she replied, "So and so we're all here for you, you're not alone, blah blah blah. And I was like, my God. I was like, hallelujah.
Something's getting through to them.
Yeah, I know, it was so lovely. And then I emailed her after, the student, and I said, like, you have absolutely blown me away with your attitude. Like, you're so mature and so supportive. I said, please keep hold of this attitude and don't ever let it fade. Take it back with you after lockdown. And it was lovely. They were so supportive and so wonderful, bless them. So I hope that they benefited from it. I think they did.
And talking about lockdown and the pandemic, how has that been for you? Because I mean, it's one thing for you to be fast tracked to the teaching world, but to then have to navigate it in a pandemic, how's that been for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty mad, to be honest. I thought, it'd be quite nice being at home and teaching from home. You won't have to manage behaviour in the classroom and have like kids kicking off and whatever. But it has been really, really difficult. It has been really difficult because we had to monitor engagement through this like spreadsheet and which kids were doing work, which kids were engaging, and a lot of kids didn't engage for various reasons. They didn't send work, they didn't contact or reply to teachers, parents weren't replying to teachers. And I think for me, there were specific students that I really, really worried about. I worried about them before the pandemic, but a lot of them found it really, really difficult and anxiety provoking. And I think that it will have an impact on their well-being and how they feel about school and the world, I think, after this. So it has been quite a challenge, and not being able to directly support them and check in with them face to face, it was pretty mad. And of course I had those keyboard warriors during my lessons on Teams that would like just say random shit on the chat and just awful, honestly.
Do you feel like, because you know how you were saying your goal and you strive to be this empathetic and supportive safe space for kids, do you feel like you almost had some sort of, I don't want to say lack, because of course you weren't lacking, but you weren't getting to fulfill that properly, but because of the pandemic, because you weren't getting to physically be there one-to-one with them?
Yeah, 100%. It was so difficult. So one of my roles that I've recently taken on in the school is young carers, which I'm splitting with another teacher, because I've also taken on deputy head of house.
Kind of flex.
We started our support for young carers properly during lockdown and had to somehow reach out to them and get an idea of numbers and who needed support and different responsibilities. And it was so difficult because we couldn't go and see those students in school and say, reach out and give our support. And we didn't even have an idea of numbers of young carers in the school. So that has been a massive challenge, that we don't have that face-to-face communication with them, and it's all had to be done over email or Teams or phone call. It's worrying. It's worrying. Bless them.
Do you feel like you're going to have, like, obviously you're like emotionally invested in the children, but do you feel like you're almost going to have to like pick up the slack now post, like when as the kids have now come back to school, like there's so much like emotional things that have gone on at home, but also because they haven't done all the work and stuff, you've got so much more work to do now that they've come back. Have you already felt that?
Yeah, I think for me the priority has been their well-being, and I've said this to them. I said, please do not worry if you didn't do work over lockdown or you managed a couple of lessons. I'm not bothered. And I don't know about other subjects, but English, we've just cracked on with new stuff, and we've basically just done this project, which is hopefully a kind of gentle reintroduction into English and into school. So we haven't come straight back into learning or tried to fill or close the gaps. Because I don't think that's going to be helpful or productive for anyone. The thing that is worrying is there were children that were quite behind anyway before lockdown, and that gap has just, strengthened and widened even more. For example, reading ages. Like, I've got kids in my tutor group who are year 7 who have reading ages of 6 or 7 years old, which is in the middle of primary. That's got even worse because of lockdown. You know, they don't have reading books, they don't want to do the work, so it is a struggle in getting them back into the routines and back into the style of learning, because a lot of them have had 3-4 months off. But at the moment it's well-being and it's behavior, and it's teaching them how to behave and learn. Okay,
you've spoken a lot about how the children are doing in school, but I wanted to ask more about how you've been, because obviously we're best friends, we talk fairly regularly, and you know, every time I speak to you I feel like you've taken on more work, more responsibility at work, and I just wonder, like, do you have time for yourself? Like, how have you, or do you feel like you cope better when you've got more going on to kind of distract yourself?
Yeah, I think, you know, as well, I'm one of these people that just takes things on just to be really, really busy. I like being busy, and I respond well when I have lots and lots on, but also I'm one of these people that can easily work myself to the ground. I tend to get to a stage where I do become ill because I'm working too much, but I have learned to manage that much more. So I give myself a deadline where I work at school till 5 o'clock, and then I leave my laptop there in the week, and then come back and just enjoy my evenings. I don't work on a Saturday, and then I'll do work on a Sunday. So I've got marking to do this afternoon. Yeah, I mean, it's a process, and I think the more experienced I am, it will become easier, and I'll be able to manage my workload more and more and more, and not say yes to everything.
Can I just say, you sound like the most organised and disciplined teacher I've ever met, with what you said, where you leave it at 5, you don't work on a Saturday. That, I think that's incredible that you've set those ground rules for yourself, because I think a lot of people, when they start teaching, and this isn't a disrespect to any teachers who don't do this, because I think it's incredible. I think you're all underdogs for sure, and I think, you know, the way that however you get through it, you get through it. But so many people that I know, they do take it home with them. It doesn't end at 5, and it is all weekend. You know, I think it's very good that you're able to already do that for yourself, and I hope that continues for you.
Yeah, I mean, recently there are times when I work past 5, and I have done since we've been back after lockdown. I have been working past 5. I stay till 6. I get in early, so I'm still doing 11-hour days in the week. I get in at 7:15. So if I don't finish at 5, 5:30, 6, I would just be ill. I'd just be absolutely exhausted. So it's really important that I have that mental space to try and switch off. But I'm always thinking about teaching. It comes into my head all the time. It's all consuming, and that's something that I had no idea of until I became a teacher. It is insane, like, how exhausting it is. It's mad. But the more you put in, the more you'll get out. And as I said before, I'm so honored to be gifted with this position that I'm in. It's absolutely amazing. Like, I have the opportunity to change lives and support life to grow, and I think there's nothing that
God, Alice.
it's true.
Really
you keep making me cry today.
No, but I'm not even doing it to like take the piss or like be all cliched. Like, it's so true. Like,
it is.
Or lives that I care about so much, and not even like, for me, I'm always drawn to the naughty shitty boys. Like, I just love them. They make me howl. They're so nasty, and I just love it. I'm like, give me more, like, challenge it. You know? So even that, like, you know, if I isolate a kid one day and I'll see him in isolation, and I'm like, look, what are we going to do with you? Because at the moment this is not working between us. Like, I can't give you any more than I'm giving you at the moment. And then he comes the next day and he puts his hand up to answer a question. I'm like, this is why I do my fucking job. Like, this literally, I care so much about them. I care so much.
And I'm sure by you, like, having that kind of frank conversation with them, and, like, you know, one-on-one, probably, you know, shows them that you've got that respect for them, and that's probably why it's reciprocated. And that's, you know, that doesn't happen with all teachers. I remember you telling me that you were starting your teacher training, and it just kind of clicked in my head. I was like, this is actually perfect for you. Like, I can really imagine you in a classroom, because you've got such a good balance between being fun and joking around, and, you know, that sarcasm, that wit, but also really cracking the whip. Like I can imagine being in your classroom, sort of being on like, oh, that's a bit scary, but we love Miss, like she's great, you know, like knowing that kind of, that you've got a boundary. If I wish I could be a fly on the wall in your lesson, because I think it'd be brilliant.
I feel like you've got the perfect balance of being fun and assertive. Like, I think
I try. Yeah. And as feedback's been really nice, because we've had so many observations, obviously, over the past year or so. And that's something that has been picked up, is that I can't remember what they call it. Warm strict, or warm firm, or something like that.
Right.
Which is what I want, you know. I want them to feel safe. I want us to have a laugh. I love it. That's why I love year 10 and year 11, because you can have that relationship, that bouncy relationship, but at the same time, they know not to take the piss. And if they
respect,
they're going to know about it, unfortunately.
Yeah. So you say that you get home, you've got these boundaries for yourself. What do you do in your spare time? Have you got anything else going on the side that you might be writing, or
so during lockdown, first lockdown, which was like last year or so ago, I started writing this blog, and the idea behind this was that I love expressing myself, and I feel like I'm quite flat. I really like to write. I like to write, and I've never really had an outlet of doing it. And I just thought, I really want to start a blog, and I want to see what happens. So I started this blog. I think it was before lockdown, but I started posting them during lockdown. And it was mainly like reflections for me as well on starting teaching, and different funny moments that had happened during teaching that I wanted to document, so I can look back in years to come and think, oh my God, I know exactly who that student is. And I remember felt like at that time there was that really inappropriate comment. And I started writing it, and I showed it to friends, and I showed it to you, Jess. I think I sent it, and I said, do you think I should start posting these? And people, like, they're funny, they're good, and I like making people laugh, and I like writing. So I thought that I'd try and mix the two, and just posted a few blog posts. So.
Jess sent me the link before this episode when we were prepping for this episode, and I had my headphones on because I think it was my brother or my dad, they were watching something, so I was like, right, I'll do something so that I'm not interfering with them. I'll be quiet. And Jess sends me the link, and I click on it, and I was like, right, I'll go to the first entry. I won't read all of them because I want to be able to ask you questions. I don't know all the answer stuff. I burst out laughing so loud on the first entry. I thought it was hysterical. I really encourage all of our listeners to go and read this blog, because it's hilarious. It's so funny. You're so you're blunt about everything and dry and witty, but it's so funny, because I was saying to just before this, to me, it was almost like a reflection or a representation of what a teacher is thinking when they're getting, like, I just imagined you in a classroom being, you know, all professional, but inside boiling, and literally going through a door, shutting it, and then exploding. And I thought, this must be the brain and mindset of all teachers right here, and it's so entertaining. I wish this would be made into a book.
Oh, thank you. I've absolutely loved writing about it and reading it back and kind of reliving those experiences, because such funny stuff happens in the class that you just couldn't even make up. Like, it's mad. And I really wanted to remember those memories, because that's also such a beautiful side of teaching. I think it gets lost, you know, in all the shit and all the sludge and the marking and the workload. These little just bursts of light and energy and just like inappropriate stuff. I can't even cope with some of it. But
yeah, your blogs, and it's not just all like really crude humor and stuff. I feel like there are some really lovely sweet moments in there, and I think it really reflects you as a person. I think that's literally you in writing. And really encourage anyone, even if you're a teacher, I think you'd really relate to it.
Anyone 100%. I challenge you to not relate to this, because I just think it's it's just so spot on. It's so, and I'm not even a teacher, but I know it's completely accurate. I just think it's so funny. Even when it's moments where you're talking about how, and I can't remember if this was in the particular blog that I'd read, but I know that you've definitely mentioned it on social media and stuff, where you've spent weeks teaching a child or a class a certain lesson, and then you're marking their work, and it couldn't be further from what you've been teaching them, and you're like, what is this?
Honestly, like the shit that I find in their books, like I was marking, God love them, I was marking year 10 books the other day, and really neat, lovely, beautiful book, gorgeous girl, and it was features of an informal letter, and I remember teaching them, and I was like, use informal colloquial language, but don't use slang, so lol, LMAO, all that stuff, and then makes them laugh when I say that. And so I was looking back at her notes, and really beautiful, looking through it, oh yeah, lovely, really, really pretty, and then it said, final bullet point, do not use slag.
She's right, you don't use a slag.
You don't use slag in an informal letter, but I left it. I was like, I'm not going to correct the spelling. I was like, I'm just going to move on from there, there's bigger fish to fry. But yeah, bless him, I just sit there and chuckle marking their books, love them.
Have you had any other teachers read it? So you sent it to friends to read. Did you send it to your teacher friends?
Yeah, my mentor's read it, she loves it, and the teacher that I mentioned earlier, he has read it, and he's very dry and witty and so intelligent, so intelligent, and he's a teacher that I really aspire to be like, but I don't think I will ever be. He's so calm and quiet and soft. I'm just honesty, as you can imagine, but he read it and he was like, it's brilliant, and I was like, say it again, say it. But I actually had a student the other day, this student I mentioned quite a lot in the blog, he is just the bane of my life, but he's actually quite hilarious, I just can't help but like it. He said to me the other day, he was like, Miss, you are so loud. He said if I was wearing headphones I would still hear you, and he was like, kept going, just turn it down, you're so loud. I know.
What did he get for that?
No, I was like, yeah, fairs. And he said, oh, whenever you get too loud, can I tell you to turn it down? And I was like, look, if that's going to help you and keep you in the classroom, then yeah, please, as
long as I get to do the same to you.
yeah. Oh, bless them, they are funny.
So do you have any like goals in your teaching career? Is there a higher position that you want to progress to, or something slightly different?
Yeah, it's interesting. I could go down kind of a departmental route, so English specific stuff, so head of department that way, or stuff to do with literacy or anything like that, or I could go down a more of a pastoral route. You could kind of mix the two, but it depends kind of which positions. And I have been thinking, over the last year or so being in teaching, I love the pastoral side of things. I love those kids that need that extra support and are a little bit bubbly and a bit bouncy. Like, those are the kids that I'm drawn to. The kids that are beautiful and do their work and they're lovely, I love them too, obviously, but the little shits, I just love them. They're lush. They're so full of energy and so full of personality, and if you can get them to stay and do some work when they wouldn't usually, it's just amazing, honestly.
I'm sure they make their job less boring as well.
Yeah,
so, I mean, definitely. If you had all perfect kids, as great as that would be, it's not challenging.
No, definitely, that's what I like a challenge. So I've always thought that I would love to go down the pastoral side of things, but I find safeguarding really interesting. So safeguarding those children that are vulnerable, and managing that sort of things. I would love to have training in safeguarding further down the line. But if I carry on, so obviously I've deputy head of house now role, so if I kind of went down the head of house role, whenever that would be, you can be trained in safeguarding head of house level, so that might be a nice link in that. But we'll see what comes up. And
what about with the blog? Is that something that you're hoping to develop more?
I would love to write more regularly, and I would absolutely love to write a book. And I don't know why, but I've been thinking about it more recently. I just
should. I really do. I think it would be brilliant because you can get self-published easily.
Yeah. I would love to write a book. I just want to continue writing, but at the moment I don't really have a lot of time. I took it up obviously last year when when no one was really working, or people were working from home more, and I had more time. I was writing poetry as well, which I really enjoyed, which was obviously the complete other end to blog.
I remember you sending them to me and not telling me what it was about.
Yeah.
And I was interpreting it in such a different way to you, but I felt like you really enjoyed that, because you were like, I really didn't see that angle of it. And I love that. I love how ambiguous it is.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm really hoping now that the future is looking like you're getting all of the pastoral levels that you want and stuff, but I'm really, really hoping from a selfish point of view that this is a lot of literature for us.
Oh my God.
Maybe like volume 1 and 2, like first years of teaching, and then a volume of pandemic teaching. Oh, this would be brilliant.
I would love to keep writing, and I would love at some point to write a book or write some sort of thing. Yeah, I do really enjoy it.
If you weren't a teacher, do you have any other careers that you would want to go into?
I mentioned earlier, didn't I, about when I was working with older people in quarantine, and that's something that I thought I would go into. I wanted to study to be a doctor, and then I looked at masters in neuroscience and memory, and to go down that side of things. It was amazing. I learned so much from that placement year, and I absolutely loved it. So probably something medical, doctor, or going into research maybe, or something.
I just keep thinking back to when we were at uni together and how organized and everything you're coming across now, but all I had in my mind earlier was your room at uni, which was just an absolute tip. Like, you have never seen anything like it. There was like food on the floor, there was like plates and cutlery everywhere.
Absolutely horrific. And I think I've said to you, like, I have this one memory that stands out, that kind of, it was really a moment of kind of realization for me, and it made me just stop and kind of evaluate my life and my life choices. Is I walked into my uni room and I skidded and slipped on a plate and just went arse over tit, and I thought, no, things need to change. They need to improve, because this is unacceptable.
But what I love is that if you find something that you are so passionate about and you absolutely love, then you go like full steam ahead into it, and you throw everything of yourself into it. But if there's something that you're not really that bothered about, then it's just gets sort of
I think so many people can relate to that, though. I think that's such a relatable thing.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean the difference between uni me and current me is quite stark, actually. You couldn't, the two wouldn't be friends, I don't think.
So we like to dedicate each episode to a charity or an organisation. So what have you chosen today?
So I mentioned earlier about Empathy Week, which is something that I led this year in the school that I'm working in. And it's an organisation that aims to develop students' empathy skills, resilience, leadership, organisation, through exposing them and giving them the opportunity to learn about real life individuals and barriers that they've faced in everyday life. So what was covered in Empathy Week this year was cultural identity, racism, Black Lives Matter. There was an amazing story about a man who had to seek asylum and gain refugee status. And so Empathy Week is a lovely thing, and I think it's a really powerful thing, and I really, really enjoy doing it with the students. So Empathy Week is one of the things that I wanted to talk about and kind of mention. And then off the back of that, one individual that the students and I learned about was a man called Hussein, who lives in London now, and he created this small company. And at the time, it was only him working for them, and it's called Cape Mentors, which now, I know, stands for Creative Alternative Paths for Education. And it basically provides tutoring and mentoring for students who have either been permanently excluded from school, or they're at risk of exclusion. So it provides one-to-one support for them to get back on the path to education by nurturing that relationship between the mentor and the tutor and the student. And it's close to my heart because there are, you know, quite a few students in the school now that I teach currently who are at risk of exclusion and are constantly in and out of education, and the hope that they've lost for themselves is really, really interesting and quite disheartening. And I think Kate Mentors is amazing, the idea of it, because it's someone flying a flag for those students and saying that lost hope for them and there is a way back into education for them. So yeah.
So how can people find out more about them? So is it katementors.com where they can read up more about their services and what they do? And then also the same with Empathy Week? Yeah,
so Empathy Week, if you just type Empathy Week in online, then it will just come up with the website. So every year there is an Empathy Week, and it's just been, so in end of February, I think it was March, and we just had Empathy Week. I think it's the second year that they've done it, but it's free for all state schools to register their schools to do. Private schools have to pay for it, but all the resources, so all the lessons, all the stories, all the lesson plans are provided, and they're differentiated for ages and key stage. So it's all provided for you, and you just have to facilitate that with the students. The support's amazing. Like, I emailed the bloke Ed Kerwin who initiated it, and he replied really quickly and was fantastic. And I think it's such an amazing program, and I think that so many students would benefit from taking part in it.
Great. So everyone should go check that out, and especially if you're a teacher as well, see if you can implement that into your school. So the last question that we like to ask all of our guests is, what makes up your circle?
I've got a group of amazing friends who I know from Cardiff, and when I lived in Cardiff and uni, and obviously I've got my teaching friends now who are kind of my new circle, I suppose, in the last couple of years. So lots and lots of different people around me, and my mum I'm really close to as well, and my girlfriend Abby as well. Yeah,
I'm yet to meet, but I'm excited
I
to
know. Yeah, pandemic life. Lots of lovely supportive people around me.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We've loved having you on, and we can't wait to have you back on, especially when you're making all your books.
Oh my god.
So if anyone would like to check out her blog, you can go into the links in our description, which will be across all of our platforms. Please make sure to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Make sure to stream on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and we'll see you for our next episode.
Thank you.